I received an email message from legendary physicist and climate scientist Peter Wadhams on Sunday, July 25th, 2021. In part, he wrote, quote, "Dear Guy, just saw your article on 2C being irrelevant. I agree with you, but over many years I have managed to identify one reason why it might have been pulled out of the air. If you look at graphs of the yields of major crops, you find that in nearly every case they show a peak at 2C warming, and that beyond that the yield goes down, sometimes drastically." End quote. Because I've produced so much material, I'm not sure to what article or video Peter Wadhams was referring. Part of my response: an economist such as William Nordhaus might understand that idea. I'm referring specifically to Professor Wadhams's idea of a profound decline in crop production once we hit 2C above the 1750 baseline. This reminds me of the story of a neoclassical economist locked in a prison. The guards, sometimes called correctional officers by people who prefer political correctness to accuracy, haven't shown up for 24 hours. The economist is starting to get hungry, but he's not worried. After all, demand always generates supply, as required, and there are plenty of inmates who are getting hungry. That old joke aside, even people within the so-called dismal science of economics understand that crop failure is bad for business. As I pointed out a few dozen times in this space, this civilization resembles its predecessors in requiring the growth, storage, and distribution of grains at scale. In other words, retention of habitat for human animals depends upon our ability to grow, store, and distribute grains at a large scale. What is habitat anyway? The word was defined by Linnea Hall and colleagues in the peer-reviewed Wildlife Society Bulletin in its spring 1997 issue, with the expected slant towards wildlife ecology. Quote, "We define habitat as the resources and conditions present in an area that produce occupancy, including survival and reproduction, by a given organism. Habitat is organism-specific. It relates the presence of a species, population, or individual to an area's physical and biological characteristics. It is the sum of the specific resources that are needed by organisms. Whenever an organism is provided with resources that allow it to survive, that is habitat. Thus, migration and dispersal corridors in the land that animals occupy during breeding and non-breeding seasons are habitat." End quote. We reached the highest global average temperature experienced by our species on Earth more than 4 years ago, as pointed out by James Hansen and 14 other colleagues on July 18, 2017, in the peer-reviewed journal Earth System Dynamics. The planet has not cooled in the intervening period. Planetary overheating is already causing loss of habitat for human animals on Earth, a fact made readily obvious by two primary sources, both of them conservative in nature. 1. Lethal wet bulb temperatures are being surpassed around the world, as pointed out by Colin Raymond and colleagues in their May 8, 2020 peer-reviewed paper in Science Advances. And 2, the deaths of more than 5 million people per year are being attributed to climate change, as indicated by a paper penned by Zhao and 67 other colleagues in the peer-reviewed Lancet Planetary Health on July 1, 2021. In other words, there is a strong link between high temperature and crop failure. This should not come as a surprise, considering that civilizations arose for the first time in our 320,000-year history only a few thousand years ago, shortly after our favorite planet achieved a cool, stable temperature of about 13.5 degrees Celsius. That's about 56 degrees Fahrenheit. In addition, this set of living arrangements will not persist long in the wake of a decline in grain production. It matters little what you eat. The entire global socio-economic system depends upon grains, and lots of them. Collectively, we managed to overheat this planet. From my well-informed perspective, only the MEER ReflEction framework offers a positive way forward. The reflective mirrors used by this framework are not a silver bullet, as I pointed out before. Rather, the mirrors must be accompanied by significant changes in human behavior. Among these changes in behavior is the recognition that we are all connected in a variety of biophysical and socioeconomic ways. Formalizing these connections might help you solidify your relationships with the people and other organisms in your life, as has been the case for me. We are one. I recommend acting accordingly. Doing so just might allow for the continued retention of habitat for our species on this most beautiful of planets.